the values that have emerged for you during this time. I'd love you just to go a little bit deeper. You've all queued it up really beautifully, but I think our audience would love to know kind of how that lands and if it lands. So Giulia, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, truth first is knowledge. So now we've been confronted with all of this reality. And what is it? Personally, it's been for me how do I take my my values and really use them to give back to the community and take action and do something. And it's so huge because we can, all sympathize and empathize with whatever is going on with other people and in the world, and even with our partners and with ourselves. But what are we doing to actually make change? So I think a lot of that is it's patience and understanding that we have time, but also really trying to take action and do things that are going to help each other and ourselves out. So that's definitely a big lesson for me. I'm still trying to figure out how do I take all of what I'm feeling and give it back in a way that is appropriate and satisfying and sort of like full circle for my community, for my relationships with people, and for the greater country and the world. And that is not only through the teaching that I want to offer, but also how I am as a citizen and as a human.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Kate, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. A lot of different things came up for me with this, and I think that service was one piece that I think you were just speaking so beautifully to, Giulia. That we have this opportunity as teachers to to interact and interface with people and to use the tools that we've been given and taught by our teachers and by our guides, and to be of service in the ways that we have done, but in new ways that are becoming really clear, and again being sort of uncovered in us experiencing these new, not experiencing, but seeing more clearly these truths and priorities. I think is another piece to that. Getting really clear on what our priorities are, and again, where we can put that energy and that knowledge and understanding to the best use for the community. And I think another piece that's come up for me in this is the idea of acceptance and also communication kind of going hand in hand. And there's a concept that comes up a lot for me in the yoga teachings called Parinamavada. And my understanding of this concept is that the realization or the acknowledgement that as we said before, the world is always changing. Everything in nature, including us, is always in this constant state of change, like you were speaking to, Lesley. And that in order to proceed, right, in this sort of formal way of saying it, in order to proceed in any endeavor successfully, and I think of that as just in order to move through our life with greater ease and connection and clarity, that we have to really understand where we are in any given moment as we start the day, as we start a practice, as we start conversation. And so that involves, a practice of tuning in, of looking in and acknowledging how we're feeling physically, emotionally, energetically. And then there's this level of, I believe, this level of kind of acceptance that has to come in and honoring that. And when we do that, then the next right step becomes clear. And so that's where that communication piece comes in, where we can then communicate from a place of clarity and greater understanding for ourselves and hopefully for others. And so those two are pieces that have been, you know, and I use this with my kids all the time now, even more so now. It's like, okay, where is this coming from? Let's check in with how we're feeling. And then once we get clarity on that, a lot more becomes clear. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it completely does. And I think it's this opportunity to pause and to bring those values and concepts in how we show up in the world, right? And I think it's beautiful that you can recognize that and have the self-awareness to then use that also with your kids. Like that's a real, it's such a gift for all of us to be able to do that. And when we do that, there is an ease to it, which is really lovely. So I certainly, and just, I'm taking notes. If my head's down, I'm listening, but I am taking notes because some of the pieces that you guys are speaking to and of really resonate and are quite beautiful. So I want to make sure I'm catching them in the moment. So thank you for that, Kate. And Lesley, we'll end with you this time. So yeah, perfect.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just really appreciating so much of what Kate and Giulia are saying. And I forgot the question because I'm enjoying listening to what they're saying. But what I'm really getting from it and appreciating is this, what seems to be coming through is truth as a practice. And I just appreciate that insight very much from the two of you in saying that, because we tend to think of truth, or I tend to think of truth as like, you know, is it true or is it false, right? Really linear. And truth as a practice gives it like a liquidity, right? It has a movement to it. And in that way, it's really vital, and it's constantly shifting and changing. And, you know, what we think is true in one moment might be very different tomorrow. And so I think that just seeing that truth as a practice, and that the foundation of that practice is really awareness, present moment awareness, and like Kate was just saying, you know, if we can know what we are actually feeling and experiencing, if we have an embodied practice like an asana practice, because we can hide, right? We can hide from our own truth very easily. That's what corporations and politicians and all they make a lot of money on our hiding from ourselves. But, you know, when you get on that yoga mat some days, right, and you go into that first down dog, and it's like, ooh, here's what's really happening today. And it just goes in. And that's why I think having an embodied practice like an asana practice, meditation, all these things where the body is that vessel, and it teaches us where we're being truthful and where we're not. And I think if we can learn how to listen, and that's where the philosophy comes in. But to me, that's always like the philosophy on a cellular level is when we get on the asana mat. And I was just thinking also, you know, just about this funny time where we're all teaching on Zoom and yoga studios have closed down. And earlier on, some people were talking about what it's like to be a teacher now. And the truthfulness that I think is demanded of us as teachers was really, at first it was so vulnerable, because you go into the yoga classroom, you know, you have your thing and you've got, and that's, but, you know, when they're in your own home and you're in your students' homes, you know, and I teach at 7 a.m. and now, you know, in the beginning, everything was all prepared. And now it's like, I'm in my pajamas, they're in their pajamas, and we're all together. And that has been a real teaching for me. It's been a real learning curve. Even after 20 something years of doing this has been one of the greatest teaching times for me as a teacher, because the vulnerability of just being who you are, being truthful to this moment. This is my house. These are my kids. My internet's not working today. You know, all of that kind of stuff. This is my response to things. And then we share that together. And what's really cool, and what I wouldn't have anticipated, is that it's deepened those relationships so much. And my own commitment to those relationships, but also the students, you know, and that it's okay to be vulnerable. And I think that, you know, it's funny, even as a 41-year-old woman, I still have to learn this, right? That it's okay to be vulnerable. And that's kind of the great teaching truth of this time for me, because so much of this industry is, you know, structured around a degree of pageantry. And when that's all cut out, how beautiful, how raw, how truthful, right?
It's beautiful. It sounds like there's a certain level of receptivity too with your students. And I love that concept actually. And it's like really powerful to think of this idea that you have an opportunity to deepen a relationship because, like on a clinical side, my coaching side is like, I'm often talking about, some of the limitations of this form of expression, right? Zooming everything, FaceTiming everything, because we sometimes can miss some of the cues, right? And I just love, I love that learning, that aha moment that I had when you were speaking in terms of like, this is it. This is how I'm showing up today. And any surprises with your students? Like, I mean, you're saying that they're receptive. Or people like, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how people react to that. It's very cool.
Yeah, no, I think it's very freeing for them. And I've seen them really open up and it's really fun. I mean, I'm an ashram girl at the heart. I lived at, Ananda when I was in my 20s and it's cute. It's cute to see people trusting me on this level and letting me into their homes and practicing in their underpants or whatever they're doing. It's all in these days. And I love it. It's fun. And I keep calling it like our big cosmic sleepover party. It's like, oh, here we are again, every single day we're there. And, and some days, it's all across the board. It's a positive experience for me. Some days it's tough to sit in front of your computer where you just want to touch someone or you just want to connect with someone. And there are things that might come up where a hug would solve it or eye contact or something like that you can't do on the Zoom. And I might not catch up on the subtle things that people are experiencing like you do, of course, when you're in person. But no, overall, it's cool to see that like when someone loosens up, then the students loosen up. And it's really, it's really beautiful to have that. And it's kind of a test to see like all these things that we learn over. I mean, I've heard people tell me everything, with the yoga magazines. Oh, you got to get rid of those bangs, on the cover, can you pull back your bangs? All that kind of stuff. I mean, just over and over. And it's in what do we listen to? And then finally you just say, these are my bangs.
Yeah. It's like, it's unapologetic, And then it's also like you really find out how valuable it is to you to be truthful and to be honest with who you are. And then also the people, your students, it's like maybe you'll lose a few, but you'll really see who's the group that is there with you. And that's been a huge thing too, So it's great.
Really, it's also super interesting. And I think you're right, Giulia, like the people that will stay with you are probably going to have that depth and that kind of, the vulnerability to go the distance. But I also, and I like this idea of the pageantry, right? Because we've all, in case the folks that joined in a little late, all of these yoginis have deep experience, in the practice and teaching, have been all over the world, real experts in their field. So, I love that you acknowledge the pageantry because we probably all have circled around New York because we all love Hyde and we're in, during that time where it was kind of this rise of, so much happening in the world of yoga and kind of this experience that became really probably further and further away, right, from a lot of what we're talking about. Not categorically, but certainly different kind of expressions of it. And so this is just like reset, being in your living room, their living room, in your underwear or whatever that looks like. I mean, you're really not more stripped down sort of, metaphysically and literally than that. And so again, different concepts that maybe I certainly wasn't thinking of. So those images will stay with me past our conversation for sure. It's really cool. And it leads nicely into our last one. I have to